in a win that has sent shockwaves through the Democratic Party. An unabashedly left-wing epidemiologist has been chosen as the Democrat nominee to fight for its Senate seat in Michigan in November. Some see it as a desperate move, at a time when the Republican Party is moving full steam ahead to prosecute its rivals, like Dr Anthony Fauci, Joe Biden's former COVID czar, who was browbeaten just over a week ago in a heated Senate hearing.
It is a total disgrace what you did to this country.
You don't want to answer questions. It's because you did all kinds of terrible things. It's because during the pandemic, you got rich.
Here I am sitting in front of you 6 years later saying, who the do you think you were for doing that?
I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris, and you're listening to The Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, North America correspondent Michael Koziol on why Democrats are gambling their ability to regain power in November on an insurgent who has argued for the U.S. to cut military aid to Israel, and why Republicans are grilling Dr. Fauci on his decisions during the COVID pandemic. Now, it's August the 10th. Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Okay, well, just hours before we are recording this, news broke that I think it's fair to say sent shockwaves through the Democratic Party, because this is that a left-wing health administrator in Michigan, this is Abdul El-Sayed, he won the primary to go on and fight for a Senate seat in November. This is a swing state, but just tell us why I guess this was such a shock for the Democrats and perhaps quite a gamble for them too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the polls suggested that it was going to happen, and in the end it was very close. But Abdul El-Sayed, the left-wing progressive, the first Muslim to be nominated for the Senate by the Democratic Party, certainly the anti-establishment candidate, not backed by the big money, not backed by the big names in the Democratic Party. He has been victorious.
We begin tonight in Michigan, where a progressive who has never held elected office defeated an establishment-backed congresswoman in the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate.
El-Sayed won the Democratic nomination, defeating moderate Haley Stevens in a closer-than-expected race that exposed divisions within the party. Outside groups poured more than $60 million into advertising, backing Stevens, making it one of the most expensive primaries.
We've all kind of been fascinated over the last year by the rise of Zoran Mamdani and other sort of left-wing progressive candidates really challenging the centrist Democrats. And this is an example of it succeeding outside of, those big progressive cities like New York or San Francisco or other places. As you say, this is Michigan. It's in the Rust Belt. It's in the Midwest. It's a swing state. It voted for Trump in 2024 and 2016. Now, this was a primary among just Democrats, choosing between two Democrats, or three Democrats technically. And, look, they've gone for the left-wing candidate. They've thumbed their noses at the establishment and the elites in Washington and the big money. And now the question is, well, can that person win the general election in a state like Michigan? And that's why some Democrats, not all, but quite a few, are very worried, thinking that, well, we've gone for the really left-wing guy, but this is a moderate state, and that means the Republicans are more likely to carry the seat in November. And it's a crucial seat. It's held by a Democrat who is retiring, and if the Democrats are going to have any hope of taking control of the Senate next year, then they have to win. They have to hold this seat and win several more. So it's fairly high stakes.
And I hope you can sort of help us figure out what to read into this in terms of what the Democrats are thinking. Like, looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, is this an act of desperation on behalf of Democrats to hopefully rebound from, I guess, Trump's Make America Healthy Again agenda, is vaccine skepticism and so forth, and go the other way? Because we know that El-Sayed, he stands for universal health care, lower drug costs, government-sponsored health insurance, and more broadly, imposing higher tax on the wealthy. Like, that's the kind of platform he is likely to have. I mean, I read one analyst in the New Yorker, this is John Alsop, and he was saying that one conclusion you could draw from Sayed's win in this primary against Haley Stevens, who's, like you say, heavily backed by the Democrat Party establishment, was like, wow, the Democratic establishment might not be as cooked as we thought. That's one thing you could read into it, this particular analyst was saying. Is that how you read the win, or do you sort of take something else out of this?
Well, I think it's a heavy defeat for the establishment. It was the most expensive Democratic Senate primary, the most expensive Democratic, non-presidential primary ever. More than half of that money came from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Massively controversial issue, especially among Democrats, where, AIPAC, money from the Israel lobby, is basically toxic in that voter base. And so, yeah, look, that was unquestionably an issue. The healthcare issue was big. It was part of his campaign slogan. When I met him last week up in Michigan, sort of asked him, well, look, Medicare for all sounds good to an Australian, but people in a purple state of America ready for that sort of thing? Because, socialism is still a bit of a dirty word over here. And we've seen people like Donald Trump and the Republicans trying to capitalize on that and saying, socialists, communists are taking over the Democrats. People still don't really like the concept. So I asked him, how's that going to go down? And he said, well, actually, look, people have been taught not to like it, but when you, not to like the word, but when you actually ask them and interrogate them, they really do like it because the system, currently is not working. And we know that Americans pay more for healthcare and get worse results than Australia. And in fact, it was something like 60% of all healthcare in America is delivered through the public system anyway. So his point was, are they ready for it? It's happening already. We just need to do it a lot better. So look, we'll see how he goes. I think the problem is that, as the Republicans are very much trying to do right now, they're going to tie him, and he's not a democratic socialist, he's not a member of the DSA, but he's pretty left-wing, and they're going to tie him to some of the other actual DSA members who are getting nominated around the country, who do have some pretty out there ideas. I mean, there's a woman who's running for governor of Michigan who, was hauled over the coals for saying a few years ago that Thanksgiving should be cancelled. When she was asked on CNN yesterday whether she stood by that, she kind of gave a confusing answer about being a chef and, it's a painful time for a lot of people.
You said Americans should cancel Thanksgiving, should have done this in 1621. The post has been deleted. Republicans have been highlighting it. Do you still believe that Thanksgiving should be canceled?
I'm a chef, and one of the first meals that I made that was for the community when I was 16 was a Thanksgiving meal. I always think my hospitality background in owning a restaurant for 7-8 years, that bringing folks around the table to share conversation and build community is always a good thing. But Thanksgiving is also a time that's incredibly painful for many people in our communities. And so I think I wanted to make sure that people understood that there are multiple views, but views can evolve.
I think everyone understands you should just say no. I like Thanksgiving, like everyone else. So they're going to try and tie all these people together and say, look at all these crazy radical leftists who've taken over the Democratic Party. You have to vote Republican. And that's going to be, at least one of the big dynamics in the midterm elections.
Which I guess brings us to the latest backdrop, and this is the absolutely vicious 3-hour-long Senate hearing that just took place over a week ago, in which Dr. Anthony Fauci was being grilled. So just briefly remind us who Dr. Fauci is and why he's been grilled, why he's back in the spotlight.
So Anthony Fauci, I guess you call him the COVID tsar of the US. He served as 38 years as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, part of the National Institutes of Health, basically the guy responsible for public health and a senior advisor to the president. He served under, obviously, Donald Trump, who won in 2016, and then served under Biden. And so he retired in 2022, obviously at the end of a long career. He's 85 years old now. But yes, he was hauled back before Congress last week, basically to face new questions, but in many ways old questions about primarily the origins of COVID-19 and whether American-funded research in Wuhan, we all know the Wuhan labs, were responsible basically for unleashing COVID on the world.
Okay, so what new information, if anything, has come out of this grilling?
Well, look, the main thing that he was there for, so this hearing was convened by Rand Paul. He's a Republican senator, longtime nemesis of Dr. Fauci, was one of the strongest critics of him during COVID and has sort of kept it up afterwards. Now, basically, his main line of questioning goes to the source of COVID. So the National Institutes of Health gives out grants to, various groups, researchers. One of them is a non-profit based in New York called the Eco Health Alliance, which in turn used some of that funding for this viral research in Wuhan. This is called gain of function research, where you basically enhance the virus in a lab, study the potential real-world impacts of that virus being enhanced. And, it can be quite risky and it's usually highly regulated. But obviously the concern is that this happening in Wuhan, in a, authoritarian country like China, not being properly regulated or being, irregulated in ways that we would not approve of. So that's fair enough. But Dr. Fauci has been asked these questions before. I mean, there have been many hearings in Congress, including, Rand Paul on exactly these issues, hearings as recently as 2024 in the House of Representatives.
Is he suggesting that Dr. Fauci funded research that gave rise to the pandemic? Is that sort of what he is suggesting? Or is he suggesting that Dr. Fauci was covering up private suspicions that the virus leaked from a lab?
Yeah, I think he's very much a proponent of the lab leak theory, and essentially that yes, the NIH was irresponsibly, and I guess indirectly, but irresponsibly nonetheless, funding this dangerous research in Wuhan, in a place where they shouldn't have been doing that.
After the break,
Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, is now looking like he will likely be confirmed as the Attorney General. Now, that then puts him in charge of all these decisions about trying to prosecute Donald Trump's political enemies and other people that the administration doesn't like.
So is there any evidence to suggest that either A, Dr. Fauci was covering up private suspicions that the virus leaked from the lab, or is there anything to suggest that's true? Because the Republicans made public some of Dr. Fauci's diaries, the ones that he kept while he was in government, and some of that made its way into the Senate hearing, right?
So, look, what they got excited about was, there were some lines in the diary. The Fauci diaries had been made public by the Republicans, where Anthony Fauci said very early on in the pandemic, we're talking January 2020, before things had really gotten serious. He said, now we know that the market in Wuhan was not the source, it was the amplifier, and that somewhere the virus had jumped from animals to humans. The battle was basically between, did it start in the market, did it start in the lab? So people like Rand Paul have seized on this as saying, look, Anthony Fauci knew all along that it wasn't the market, it was the laboratory. Now, Fauci's made clear many times publicly since then that, this is early days in the pandemic, very, very early days. We didn't really know anything then. And it's still, it's still being debated whether it's more likely that this virus emerged from the laboratory or from the market. So I think to seize on that one line in a diary very early on in the pandemic is probably unfair.
And some of the senators who were grilling Dr. Fauci were at times really angry. Just vicious in some cases. But was there one particular instance that you were surprised by?
Oh, look, probably the most memorable moment was when Fauci's lawyer got thrown out.
You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another word. Look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered, for a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
I think that was the moment where you could tell that, part of the purpose of all this was a bit of theatre, because the lawyer was trying to say something from the bench, And Rand Paul was very emphatic in not letting him say anything, that this was a hearing for Dr. Fauci to answer questions, not the lawyer, and so had him theatrically thrown out of the room by Senate security. So that was enjoyable. And I think probably, yes, spoke to the broader point, which is that there was a bit of a show trial element of this running through the whole thing.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon, and after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote next week on a resolution certifying your contempt.
Well, this is something I really want to ask you about. What can we make of these attacks, this show trial? Like, is this just desperation by Trump's loyalists to get voters to look away from Trump's absolutely abysmal ratings in the polls? Is this an attempt to steer the nation firmly away from any Democratic health agenda towards a Maha agenda? Like, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, look, Rand Paul has consistently said he wants Anthony Fauci thrown in prison, and Donald Trump has shown a propensity to prosecute his political enemies. Now, Anthony Fauci has not, he doesn't like Anthony Fauci, but Fauci's not figured prominently among those people because he's not seen as a sort of political enemy of the president, more a sort of thorn in his side during COVID. So we'll see what happens there.
Right. Okay. And so what are the risks that Anthony Fauci could actually end up in jail?
So what's happened now is that the Senate committee that Rand Paul chairs has voted to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt. It was a vote along party lines. Democrats dissented, but Republicans control the committee. So they've made that finding, and ordinarily it would go to a vote in the full Senate. And then if the full Senate votes to hold him in contempt, it would be referred to the Department of Justice. Now, there's basically no chance of that getting up in the Senate because the Democrats are by and large against it, and there's no way the Republicans would get 60 votes that they need to get around the Senate filibuster. So what Rand Paul has said he's going to do instead is basically just deliver this contempt finding from his committee to the Department of Justice and say, here, my committee's found him in contempt, you should, press charges, essentially. Now, it doesn't bind the Department of Justice to do that, but it's an interesting political moment for the Department of Justice because, number one, it's about to be run by Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, who's currently the acting Attorney General, and the prosecutor in Washington, D.C., where this case would take place, is Jeanine Pirro, a Trump appointee, former Fox News host, and someone who is in hot water with Donald Trump at the moment over this saga with the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. Last week, she had to go into court and basically drop the case against this former Olympian, David Hearn, who had been charged with vandalizing the reflecting pool. Donald Trump, said a million times that it was destroyed by vandals. Jeanine Pirro had to front up to court and say, actually, that was not true. It was a shoddy construction job all along. Donald Trump was very upset about this. He publicly contradicted her. And so if you're Jeanine Pirro, and, suddenly the Department of Justice has this referral on its desk from Rand Paul's committee, maybe you're saying, we should try and get an indictment against this guy. So it's very interesting. It seems like it's still got a way to run. So Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, is now looking like he will likely be confirmed as the Attorney General. So he's been acting in that role for several months now, but he may be confirmed in the role. Now that then puts him in charge of all these decisions about trying to prosecute Donald Trump's political enemies and other people that the administration doesn't like. And we know that Trump is still keen to indict, to see prosecutions through against these people. It was one of the main reasons he got rid of Pam Bondi, or Pam Bondi, I should say, as the Americans do, because she wasn't getting this done. And so I think with Blanche in charge, we may very well see a more aggressive approach to trying to get these people in front of a judge. It's happening with other people. The James Comey prosecution for, posting the photo of the seashells that said 8647 on the beach. That is, proceeding.
This is just to remind listeners, former head of the FBI.
That's right. A big Trump enemy thanks to the whole Russiagate scandal. And so, yeah, look, I think Donald Trump may very well be relatively powerless after January when the new House of Representatives and Senate takes hold. But one thing he can still do in the meantime is make the most of his control of the Department of Justice by going after these people that he thinks has done him wrong. And if Todd Blanche is there, I think we should expect to see that happen and perhaps be turbocharged. I mean, Blanche, it was a very memorable moment during a hearing the other day when he was asked whether he was a friend of the president's. And Todd Blanche said, "No, I'm his lawyer." And then he very quickly corrected himself, "I was his lawyer." And that clip went viral here in the US, and it's one of the things that gave some Republicans, pause for thought about whether we should be confirming this guy because of his very, very close and, long relationship as the president's lawyer who, is now going to be in charge of the Justice Department.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your time.
Thanks, Samantha. Not a problem at all. See you next time.
Today's episode was produced by Josh Towers. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.